Greetings, I'm Squared here, and today we are going to solve triangles using trigonometry. So we want to refresh our brain on Sohcahtoa. We want to know that acronym and write it on the top of the page every time we are going to solve some triangles. Remember, sine is the opposite side over the hypotenuse, cosine is the adjacent side over the hypotenuse, and tangent is the opposite side over the adjacent. So what it means to solve a triangle, that's supposed to say find. What it means is you're going to find all the sides that they don't give you and all the angles. So even though this has an X right here, we're going to find all of them. So the easiest one to do is, since they gave us an angle, the easiest one is to find the other angle because they're complementary. So you can just say 90 minus 28 and you automatically know that angle. So the sides are a little bit more detailed. So we're going to find X, we'll call this Y. We're going to find X and Y. So to do that, we set up an equation, but we notice what side they gave us. So it doesn't really matter which angle you use, but I'm just going to choose this one, the 28. I'm going to choose 28. So I'm going to say that if I want to find Y, I would say that the sine of 28 is the opposite side over the hypotenuse. And if I want to try to find this side, I would say the cosine of 28 equals, never mind, let's not use cosine because we don't have Y yet, so we might as well use the 12. So that would be tangent. So we'd say the tangent of 28 equals 12 over X. You could use, once you find this one, you could use Pythagorean theorem to find this one. Sometimes if you round too much and then you round again, then you're a little bit off. So I always tend to use the sine and the cosine if it's not an integer. So to solve an equation like this, you can kind of think of it as a proportion. We're going to cross multiply. So 1 times 12 is 12. And then y times the sine of 28 is y times the sine of 28. I need to get y alone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide both sides by the sine of 28. Now I know that seems a little strange because your mind is just looking at the 28 if you're just learning this, but remember the sine of 28 is one number. So you don't ever want to separate those. You're not dividing by 28. The 28s won't cancel. You have to divide by the sine of 28. And when you do that, you get y equals, then we have to use our calculator for that. So bringing our calculator over, we have to say 12 divided by the sine of 28. We want to make sure our calculator's in degree mode. Mine is. It says DEG. If you try it with yours and you're not getting this as an answer, then you're probably in a different mode and need to figure out how to change that. So we want to round lengths to the nearest tenths. So that's 25.6 because that 6 tells us to move that 5 in the tenths place up 1. So 25.6. That's Y. So over here is my equation for X. So I'm going to, again, multiply both sides cross multiply to get my X alone. So I get tangent of 28 equals 12. And then to get my X alone, I'm going to divide by the tangent of 28. And again, I'm going to use my calculator. I'm going to say 12 divided by the tangent of 28. And it says 22.56, so 22.6. X equals 22.6. And then I always like to sit back and say, does that make sense? So one of the things I ask myself is, did I get the longest part to be Y? And is the shortest side opposite the smallest angle? 12 is definitely smaller than the 22 that I found, and 62 is bigger than 28. So that makes sense. I just like it to make sense because if it doesn't, I know I did something wrong. So I just double check that when I'm done because I make mistakes. Okay, so over here, the easiest one, obviously the one we just had was 62, so that makes this one pretty easy. If that's 62, we automatically know that's 28. So I found my angles. Remember, solving a triangle means to find all the sides and angles. So I'm going to call this one X and this one Y, just because I can. So I am going to set up an equation. Now I'm going to, let's just use the 62 this time. So I'm going to say that the sine, because I have the opposite side, so I always want to make sure I know what side I have, because then I can use tangent because it uses opposite and sine because it uses opposite. And I'm using this 62. So if I was using the 28, I would have used cosine and tangent. Okay, so sine of the angle, which in this case I'm using 62, is equal to the opposite over the hypotenuse. So I'm going to cross multiply on both sides. I'm going to get 25 equals y times the sine of 62. And then I'm going to divide both sides by the sine of 62. And then I use my calculator. 25 divided by the sine of 62. Make sure you're doing sine of 62, not just 62. I get 28.3. The 1 tells me to keep the 3 the same. So y equals 28.3. And that should be the biggest side. So now I'm going to come over here to my, I need to find x. Now I was going to try to show you how to do it when x is in the top. So this time I'm going to use, let's see, tangent. The tangent of A. Because I want to show you how this works. The tangent of 28 is equal to the opposite over the adjacent. And I just want to show you how to solve it. It's a little bit different when you have, a little bit easier actually, when you have x in the numerator versus x in the denominator. Like this y, all of these ones so far were in the denominator. And you can kind of finagle it sometimes to make that happen, to make it a little bit easier. So when I multiply both sides, cross multiply, I get x equals 25 tangent of 28. So see how x is already all by itself? So I don't have to divide. So when I grab my calculator, I'm just going to say 25 times the tangent of 28. And if the 25 is next to the tangent, you don't actually need a multiplication sign. It automatically knows that those two will be multiplied. So x equals 13 point. Now the 2 tells me, the 9 tells me to round that 2 up to a 3. So then I go back and I just double check and see the shortest side, the x is definitely opposite the shortest angle, and the y, the 28, was definitely bigger than the 25. So I feel pretty good about that. Okay, next one. Again, that's 28. When it was 28, it was 62. When it's 38, it's probably going to be 52. So I find the angle first. This time I have the hypotenuse. So I'll just choose B. Doesn't really matter. You could choose B or A, but you just need to know what the opposite and adjacents are going to be. So I'm going to just say x and y. So to find x, I'm going to use sine because that's the opposite of my angle, and that's the hypotenuse. So I'm going to say the sine of 38 equals x over 7.8. And to find this one, I would use cosine. I'm going to say that cosine of 38 equals y over 7.8. And then I cross multiply. So I get x equals 7.8 times the sine of 38 for this x. So 7.8 times the sine of 38, 38 equals 4.8. So x equals 4.8. And I would expect that to be the smallest side since it was opposite 38. And I'm going to expect this to be between 4.8 and 7.8, the y. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to say y equals, because I'm going to cross multiply, 7.8 times the cosine of 38. So 7.8 times the cosine of 38. And I get y equals 6.1. And again, I double check. Yes, 6.1 is definitely between 4.8 and 7.8. So I'm feeling good, feeling like that's a good answer for me. Okay, last two. Let's see, 52 and 38. I didn't do that on purpose, but it's doing it for me. So 52 and 38, because our last one was the same. So this time, I'll just use my 52 angle since I used the 38 last time. I know that I am going to have the opposite side, so I'm going to need the adjacent side and the hypotenuse. So I'll just call that A and H this time for adjacent and hypotenuse. So I'm going to say the tangent of 52 equals the opposite side over the adjacent side. So when I cross multiply, I get 12 equals A times the tangent of 52. If I divide by the tangent of 52, I can find A. So 12 divided by the tangent of 52, I get 9.4 because the 7 tells me to round up 1. So A equals 9.4. And now I need to find the hypotenuse, so I can use sine. So the sine of 52 is equal to 12 over the hypotenuse, opposite over adjacent. So again, I'm going to cross multiply, and I'm going to get 12 equals h times the sine of 52. So I'm going to divide both sides by the sine of 52. So I take 12 and divide it by the sine of 52. And I get h equals 15.2. And I expect the hypotenuse to be the biggest. I expect A to be the smallest. And I expect that to be my middle one, and it is. Okay, last example. Here's my angle, 53. So then if this one was 52 and that was 12, then this one's probably going to be, sorry, that's not 12. I need to be looking right here. If this one's 52 and that's 38, then this is 53 and this is 37. That wasn't working out in my mind, and now I know why. Okay, so that's 37. We're going to need to find this as well. So I notice that x is the opposite, and this is my hypotenuse, so I can say the sine of 53 equals x over 15. So to solve that, I'm going to say 15 times the sine of 53. So remember, you would cross multiply, you'd get 15 times the sine of 53 equals x. And that was 11.97. Because this tells me to round it up, I have to say 12.0. You need to have that 0 in there. That's what x is going to be. And then for my y, oh, sorry, you couldn't see that on my calculator. And for y, I'm going to take and use cosine. So the cosine of 53 equals y over 15. So I'm going to cross multiply and get 15 cosine 53 equals y. And when I put that in my calculator, 15 times the cosine of 53, I get y equals 9 point. The 2 tells me to leave the 0 the same, so 9.0. So I get 12 and 9 and 15, and they all match up like they're supposed to. Smallest one's opposite the smallest angle, longer one is opposite the longer angle. So what you have to do, keep in mind, you got to have that Sohcahtoa there in front of you. You have to know which one to use. That's the most challenging part. And then it's just cross multiplying and using your calculator. Good luck. M squared signing out.